Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Camille Grand, who is the director of the Foundation for Strategic Research here in Paris. Welcome to the show. Since a few days, France has been riveted by revelations that the United States was spying not only on France, but on three successive presidents, Jacques Chirac, Nicolas Sarkozy, and the current president, François Hollande, and on a lot of top civil servants and diplomats. Are you surprised?
Not quite. It would have been embarrassing for the French to find out that the US was only spying on Mrs. Merkel. The nature of NSA's intercept is fascinating because it seems to be very large scale and also targeting ally leaders, which is usually the thing you don't do, or if you do them, you try not to get caught doing it. So that's the embarrassing point. The second thing the one thing that surprises me a little bit is that the reports that were leaked by WikiLeaks point at debates that were really in the open. To have why do you need an intercept and to brief the top level of the US government system on the fact because he thinks he can solve the financial crisis on his own, or on the fact that Jacques Chirac supports a diplomat for a job in UN. Those things are in the open.
This is what has come out. There might be more things that they were listening to that are more embarrassing.
For the U.S. taxpayer, I would certainly hope so, because otherwise these things, this sort of information you can get by opening the French press or talking to any official as a diplomat.
But nevertheless, this is a problem for the Obama administration, just as it was when the revelations came out that they were spying on Angela Merkel or on the president of Brazil, because obviously all the French political world is saying this is a shame, this shouldn't be happening between France.
It's truly embarrassing for the Obama administration, of course, because you normally don't spy on your allies. And all the talk about France becoming the best ally and so on becomes a bit doubtful in a context in which the NSA is eavesdropping on French senior officials and at the highest political level. Normally, of course, spying is a special word, but you try not to spy on your best partners, and this is a bit what is creating a bit of turmoil in the French political debate, even though the sensitivity is slightly different than in Germany, because because of its totalitarian experience, both with the Nazi regime and the GDR and the Stasi, is probably more sensitive to such hearing devices than the French system would be.
Nevertheless, we've learned through reports a couple of weeks ago that the US was kind of subcontracting such tapping to the German secret services, including on French targets.
Yep.
And this really raises the question, is this a thing of the past, like Barack Obama has said, or are those practices still ongoing?
Of course, it's hard to tell. The NSA has the technical means and a number of partnerships that enables it to continue a lot of these practices. The issue is whether the president has given clear political guidance that there are certain targets that shouldn't be deliberate targets of the NSA, and that's probably one thing that it's a commitment that can never be tested as long as it's not exposed. So we have to believe in the word of President Obama on the one hand, and we also have to assume that foreign intelligence services are spying on us, and the practice of some French leaders who didn't want to use a secure line for official conversation is really bound to change, I think.
Okay, off to a totally different issue, the Iran nuclear deal. June 30th is the deadline for such a deal. Simple question, will there be a deal by June 30th?
Well, currently, we are at the sort of peak of the negotiation. It's only a matter of days. What was agreed in April was that there would be a deal by June 30th, the final settlement of this Iran nuclear negotiation, with all the technical details. At this stage, I think there is a genuine willingness on the part of all parties to secure a deal and a good deal as early as possible, and possibly by June 30th. Possibly. I don't rule out that it will be further delayed by a few days or a few weeks, depending on where we are on D-Day. This has been the case in every previous round of negotiation. The deadlines set are not artificial, they help focus, but in many cases, diplomats will require a few days to secure the approval of the supreme leader in the Iranian case. Mr. Zarif needs to clear his disagreement with not only President Rouhani, but also with the supreme guide, Mr. Khamenei. So that's a key issue on the Iranian side. And on this, the messaging has been a bit ambiguous. On the other side, the US needs to have a deal that is sellable to its Congress, needs to secure a few key points. The French are insisting on a few core issues. So all of this might delay the conclusion of the deal.
But not prevent it. You're saying the parties are close enough to secure a deal, even though it's not on June 30th.
As diplomats say, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So it's impossible to rule out a last-minute, I wouldn't say collapse of the negotiation, but clear postponement of the deal. Nevertheless, I think at this stage, the most likely scenario is to have some sort of a good deal around June 30th or a little later, that will enable to move forward on this negotiation, both the lifting of the sanction and the implementation of the deal by the Iranians. What remains to be seen, of course, is in the mid to long term whether the deal that will eventually be achieved will be sustainable, and that's the biggest challenge for the negotiators, to have something that is robust enough to achieve a deal.
Right.
In the long term.
Speaking of deals that have been found and now are having problems being implemented, I want to switch to Ukraine. There was a deal reached in Minsk several months ago for a ceasefire, withdrawal of forces and of weapons. This is not totally enforced on the ground. It's generally more quiet, but we're not there. And as NATO defense ministers are meeting currently, we hear the U.S. will deploy heavy weapons, will pre-position heavy weapons in Eastern Europe for the first time. Russian responses on nuclear weapons. What's your assessment on the situation in Ukraine and in the region?
Well, on the ground, the ceasefire is more or less implemented, rather less these days. We have about 300 fatalities since the ceasefire. So it means that it's a ceasefire.
It's no real ceasefire.
It's no real ceasefire. Even though the level of fighting and the violence of the fighting has clearly decreased, and no one is clearly on the offensive. I mean, there are here and there random exchange of fire, but it's not heavily violated to this date. The issue is really the long-term implementation of Minsk. The political side, there both the Ukrainians and the separatists need to do much better. The Ukrainians have not regained control of their sovereignty over the Donbass. On the separatist side, they still expect some reforms on the coming from the Ukrainian government. So there is a bit of a debate there. But for me, the most important thing is really to freeze the conflict by truly implementing the ceasefire, allowing the OSCE, the organization that is monitoring the ceasefire, to do its job, and then to move into more of a political process involving all sides all parties to the conflict, in a way including Russia, which tries to portray itself as an honest broker when it's clearly a party to the conflict.
Right. You think that solving this Ukraine crisis will appease the tensions we're seeing between NATO and Russia, and which are clearly unprecedented since the end of the Cold War?
Well, the Ukraine is more of a symptom than the root cause of the tense relationship between Russia and the West. Russia has chosen, with Putin's re-election, a bit of a different path, both from politically, it's a more authoritarian, more conservative regime that despises the EU for being weak and gay, as they say, and thinks that Obama is also weak. So they have a very tough position, and they are really portraying the West as an enemy and not as a partner. So in a way, the cooperative relationship that we tried to establish after the Cold War is somehow behind us. And this is not going to go if the Ukrainian conflict is solved or frozen.
It's a new Cold War, in a way?
I wouldn't call it a Cold War, because the likelihood of a major war in Europe remains low.
This was the case during the Cold War as well.
Indeed. But we're in a situation where cooperation is no longer the dominant narrative, and where we see competition, geopolitical competition, the Eurasian Union versus the European Union, military competition, with the Russian nuclear and military buildup that is partially responded by NATO and by the US, with the deployment of about 250 tanks and other armored vehicles on the eastern part of Europe. These are only stockpiles of hardware. These are not troops yet to this date. To this, the Russians respond with nuclear threats and expansion of their nuclear modernization program, which is creating a fear of some sort of an arms race. We are not there yet, but we are clearly in a very complicated relationship with a Russia that is more assertive and and even more aggressive in